Welcome, everybody, to the Hidden Toxins Affecting Your Health lecture. Today, we're going to be talking about 5 of the main toxins that we see in our patients, actionable steps that you can take to reduce and remove them, and then a little more specific detox protocols if that's necessary for you. A little bit about me. My name is Kent Sayer. I have a bachelor in psychology from the FSU. I worked in the fitness field with fitness coaching, certified personal training, and making custom nutrition plans. And then I got a master's in cognition and communication from the University of Copenhagen. Currently, I am a NASM certified nutrition coach, and I've been working in the functional wellness specialist field at Nutrition Connection Balance for the last 4 years. In this presentation, we're going to be talking all things toxins, learning how to identify toxic exposures and how to remove them. So you might be asking, why is this so important? Reducing toxins will reduce your risk of unexplained symptoms. So if you have random fatigue, brain fog, gut issues, inflammation, things that just kind of show up out of nowhere and you don't know where they're coming from, toxins play a role in all of those. And toxins play a role in your overall risk of disease. Reducing toxic burden reduces your risk of disease. We're talking DNA damage, organ damage specific to certain organs depending on which toxin you're exposed to, all types of cancer, neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, infertility, and more. So it's a pretty serious topic. I've sort of narrowed this down because we could go on for hours and hours about this. I've narrowed this down to the 5 most common toxins that we see in testing patients, what you can do about them, how to identify them if it's an issue for you. And then at the end, we'll go over some more general things that you can do to reduce your toxic burden and to improve your health. We're going to start with mold. So mycotoxins and mold, they're sort of interchangeable. Mycotoxins are microscopic metabolites from mold and fungi. So mold, you think of like a moldy strawberry, you can see that there's mold. Mycotoxins are so small that you can't see them, which makes it really hard to identify when it's a problem unless you're testing for it. Some of the more general symptoms that you might experience if you have mold in your system or if you're exposed to mold in an environment that you regularly visit: fatigue, headaches, chronic sickness, coughing, sinus, and asthma, mental health issues bowel distress, nausea, rashes, hives. Some of the longer term effects include DNA damage, kidney damage, impaired growth in children, genetic mutations, immune system impairment, and even cancer with certain types of mold. So this really, both the symptoms and effects depend on which mold you're exposed to, the duration of exposure, and how well your immune system is to set up to battle it beforehand as well. We're going to go over 2 main sources of mold exposure. The first being moist indoor environments. So this is pretty self-explanatory, to be honest. You can improve your indoor environments, your home, your office, your car. You can get a HEPA air filter for your air conditioning and heating, a dehumidifier in your bathroom and your kitchen, areas that get pretty moist. You can open windows, doors, use fans, anything to improve ventilation in an enclosed space. A HEPA air purifier is like a little box that you can get in smaller spaces like a studio apartment. So for someone like me who lives in a studio apartment, this is really useful because there's not a lot of space for air to circulate to begin with. And this one I put in all caps because this is something that a lot of people don't think about. Replace the air filter in your car. Think of how many minutes, how many hours you spend in your car. And think about, have I ever thought to replace the air filter? You should replace it around every 15,000 miles or so. This is quite literally filtering the air, the exhaust from other cars when you're sitting on the highway. It's filtering anything that you breathe that gets into your car. So if you haven't done this before, I would highly suggest it. The number 2 common source of mold, other than your environment, is actually your food. So contaminated food is a big problem. The most contaminated foods I've listed on the screen here. There are others, but these are the most likely culprits from what we have seen and what the research shows. So corn and wheat products, you can think cereals that are of lower quality. Coffee is a big one, whether people want to believe it or not, because people love their coffee, and rightfully so. A lot of grocery stores now will offer mold-free coffee. It'll quite literally say it on the label. So if you are a coffee drinker, please just look for mold-free coffee. It's not that complicated, to be honest. Big bang for your buck. Make sure it's mold-free and you won't have any issues. And with coffee, it's not that you'll literally see the mold on the coffee, like you'll see gray in the bag or something. It's that mold grows on the beans and then the beans are ground up. So it's pretty much impossible to tell unless it's been tested for mold, which if you find mold-free coffee, that means it's been tested for mold. Moldy food, it's in the name. Blue cheese quite literally has mold on it. So reducing the consumption of these or avoiding it entirely. If you're someone like me who doesn't like blue cheese, it's not an issue. If you do like blue cheese, just be aware of the risk and try to consume it a little less maybe. Wine and beer, because those crops can be mold contaminated when they're ground up and fermented. Herbs and spices, that's pretty self-explanatory, mold growing on them, they're ground up into tiny bits. And then peanuts is another big one. Peanuts and peanut products, peanut butter, that's another big source. There are other nuts, but peanuts is the number 1 out of all of the different ones. And this one is actually associated with the most severe type of mold. So get high quality peanuts, get high quality peanut butter, or just avoid it entirely. It's up to you. Now you might be thinking, okay, so I have some of these random symptoms. If it's mold, what do I do about it? Or how do I even know if it's mold to begin with? So there's 2 main treatments for mold. We're supporting your immune system to help get rid of it. Number 1 is glutathione. We have this at our office. Glutathione is a natural antioxidant that your body makes already. With certain types of mold, your body will use up its stores of glutathione to protect its cells and tissues. So the longer you're exposed to mold, the more mold you're exposed to, the more glutathione you're likely to use up. So supplementing it here can be a great idea. The other option is pretty simple in theory. Antioxidants from fruits and vegetables. These antioxidants quite literally protect your cells from damage. The standard now these days, we're looking at 10 or more different fruits and vegetables per day, which is nearly impossible for almost anybody, unless you're a professional chef. And this is where Juice Plus comes in. This is something that I've taken myself for more than 10 years. NCB has been recommending it for more than 20. It's the highest quality product of its kind on the market. We find it bridges the gap between how much fruits and vegetables you should be getting and how many fruits and vegetables you actually are getting. So it gives you the nutrients from 30 different fruits, vegetables, and berries. It's third-party tested for contaminants like mold so that you know there's no mold in it. It has more than 40 clinical published studies at this point, making it the most studied product of its kind. No other greens powder, this is more than just greens, but no other greens powder compares, to be quite frank with you. So if you're gonna take any type of nutritional superfood powder, this is the one, either in capsule form or in the sleeve of superfoods that you pour into a bottle, which is actually what I have right here. If you're wondering if you have mold to begin with, or if you have severe symptoms that just aren't going away, you want answers, this is where we would do a mycotoxin test. We have this at our office. We do it by urine sample, It measures for the metabolites of 11 different types of mold and fungus. This is really useful if you want a more specific detox protocol, or if you want to figure out exactly the type of mold and sort of investigate the most likely causes of that particular type of mold. So that's another option as well. Up next, we're going to be talking about heavy metals. And this one, as many of you might know, these 5 on the screen you might be familiar with. We've got aluminum, arsenic, lead, mercury, uranium. These are 5 of the big ones that most people have heard of, and I've listed some of the sources and primary effects of heavy exposure to these. So we'll start with aluminum. The main source for most people is deodorant and antiperspirant because it helps. Aluminum is put in there to help you stop sweating. So I would recommend more natural antiperspirants or just avoiding antiperspirants and using deodorants without aluminum. You can see it on the label. It's in the ingredients list. The other main source is drinking water. And this matters because aluminum exposure in the long term negatively impacts your immune system, your nervous system, and your bone density. Moving on to arsenic, the main cause of arsenic poisoning is smoking. A very common thing now, actually, that's been coming up more and more is contaminated Ayurvedic herbs. Ayurvedic herbs specifically. So we're thinking ashwagandha, turmeric. There's a variety of others that you could Google search a whole list of Ayurvedic herbs, but those are 2 of the most common, like the most common buzzwords that people will hear about these days. If you're looking at those herbs, you really want to make sure you're getting a high quality, third-party tested, and that's something I'm going to go into a little bit deeper detail later on. Other sources of arsenic include contaminated tea, pesticides, and drinking water that's not filtered. The effects of arsenic can be pretty severe, increasing cancer risk, gout, diabetes risk, and nerve damage. So again, not good. Lead, this one just about everybody knows about, that it's just bad, plain and simple. Old paint in older buildings, unfiltered drinking water, once again, old and damaged cookware, tea kettles, and contaminated tea. The effects of this can be pretty severe again. Brain damage, bone loss, lower IQ and focus in children. So things like ADHD are more likely to develop in children if they're exposed to lead early on, or if they're exposed to lead in the womb, is what some of the research is finding. Mercury is another big one. When I say mercury, most of you will probably be thinking seafood. So I've listed 3 of the biggest culprits of mercury within the seafood community. Tuna, mackerel, and swordfish. Those are the top 3 mercury carriers as far as seafood goes. Otherwise, medications, including some injections, antibiotics, and over-the-counter painkillers, and contaminated water once again. The mercury affects brain and development, so it can induce or increase risk of ADHD, especially in younger children, infertility, thyroid problems. Moving on to uranium, this is a nuclear element. Drinking water, especially well water, is the top cause. Otherwise, nuclear exposure, depending on where you work, or if you're doing some various types of medical testing, can expose you to nuclear elements as well. Uranium affects the kidneys, can cause fatigue, infertility, and increase cancer risk. So these are 5 of the big ones. But what we've seen more often recently in patients are these: antimony from vape pens, including weed pens, air fryers if you use an air fryer a lot, and black plastic from takeout. So think takeout containers from fast food or from a restaurant, or even the utensils like forks and spoons, like the black plastic ones that they'll give you. A lot of times this black plastic is made from recycled electronic equipment, which is where the antimony comes from. So the effects of antimony exposure include depression, digestive issues, organ damage to the heart, liver, and kidneys. And I bring these three up, by the way, just because this is what we see more and more when we do test people for metals. So these are becoming more common than they were previously, which means people are exposed to them in ways that they weren't prior. Barium is up next. We're talking antacids and reflux use, especially if you use these over-the-counter products very frequently. Contaminated drinking water, medical testing like a barium swallow, that one's pretty self-explanatory. Effects of barium exposure include bone loss, stomach irritation, and irregular heartbeat. And then third on the list is gadolinium. And this one is very specific. Usually if someone has had an MRI and then they do one of our heavy metal tests, I can tell because their gadolinium will be into the yellow or red zone. And that's because gadolinium is used as a contrast dye in MRIs. So that one is pretty specific, I would say. And effects are more general here. Unpleasant headaches, fatigue, pain, nausea, yeah, that sort of thing. What I want to do a little more specific note on jewelry, because three others have been coming up as well more often. This is nickel, palladium, and cadmium. So low quality jewelry often uses these three metals as a base and then coats them with gold, silver, fake gold, fake silver, whatever it is. So remember, these are pieces of metal that are sitting on your skin, can cause skin irritation, allergic reactions, and potential toxicity with long-term exposure the more you use them. So my recommendation would be to choose higher quality jewelry products, or sterling silver is a safe bet because we know that won't expose you to any of these. Now you might have noticed how many times I mentioned unfiltered tap water. It was a lot. It was for almost all of these. Unfiltered tap water is the #1 cause of most metal exposure, period. So it is the easiest thing you can do to reduce your toxic metal exposure. This is for drinking water, for cooking, for showering if you want to go above and beyond. There's three big ways that you could filter your water. Reverse osmosis is the most effective. It can also be the most expensive if you're doing a whole house filter. So that would be #1 if you can afford it. #2, my recommendation would be to test your water using something like mytapscore.com. We have no affiliation with them, but they have a variety of tests where you can actually figure out what's exactly in your water, and that way you can buy a filter specific to those contaminants in the water. Budget options include the Brita Elite filter, which filters things like lead, mercury, arsenic, etc., the basics, or a zero water jug. These are, even though they're considered budget options, these are jugs that you fill up in your sink and then it will trickle down and filter through the jug. They're still far and above higher quality than just drinking plain tap water. So if nothing else, do this. If you can afford some other more specific options, I would recommend that. Now, if you want a metal-specific detox protocol, that's where we would want to do some testing first. So this picture you're seeing on the screen here is what the section of our toxic metals test by urine looks like. It measures 20 different toxic metals. And this one is actually pretty good because all of the markers are in the green. Let's see. That is mercury is almost into the yellow, so that's something to keep an eye on. But this is actually pretty uncommon for the most part for people to have most things in the green unless they're already doing a specific detox protocol from us. A lot of times, especially if people aren't aware of these general steps that you can take to reduce metal exposure, their markers will be into the yellow and the red. So that being said, we do have stronger therapies that we use with patients, detox therapies, but we don't use them unless we know for sure that we have metals in your system, and that's where we would do some testing first. So if you want a more specific detox protocol, I would suggest looking into our minerals and toxic heavy metals test, which is done at home, just like all of our other testing. Moving on to glyphosate, the third toxin of the day. Glyphosate is the most heavily applied herbicide in the world. So if you've heard of Roundup, or if you've done any lawn care like weed killing, you probably have heard of Roundup. Glyphosate is the main ingredient of Roundup. It is an herbicide. It is used to kill weeds, and it's also used to dry out crops. So if you've ever seen a giant tractor with those arms that stick out to the side and are spraying crops as it drives by, that is spraying glyphosate to dry out and kill the crops, because when there's less water in the crops, they're easier to harvest. So that's how glyphosate gets into our food. Glyphosate is classified as probably carcinogenic to humans by the World Health Organization, specifically the International Agency for Research on Cancer. It is not good, associated with Alzheimer's, inflammation, DNA damage, hormone disruption, and gut distress, to name a few. And I mentioned food before. Food is the number one source, and your direct environment, depending where you live and what activities you partake in, is the second top source. And we'll go into those next. So every year, the Environmental Working Group comes out with a list called the Dirty Dozen. So this is the 12 most contaminated by pesticides and herbicides fruits and vegetables on the market. So if you don't have a screenshot of this list, I would recommend screenshotting it. You can also go to ewg.org. Again, no affiliation with them, but they do some great work there. And you can get a full list of their Dirty Dozen. They also have a Clean 15 list, which is the 15 least contaminated fruits and vegetables. So that's also something to keep in mind. If you are going to go for some of these fruits and vegetables, I would recommend getting them organic if it's on the list, because organic has different regulations for which pesticides can be used and how much can be used. So if you're going to get one of these fruits or vegetables on the EWG Dirty Dozen list, get them organic. This other side of the screen is a little more nuanced. And what I mean by that is glyphosate is sprayed on oats, wheat, soy, and corn in the harvesting process. And those products are ground up and turned into things like pizza, instant oatmeal, cereal, bread, etc. And that makes it a little harder to tell specifically if there's been some exposure in the product. So what you're going to want to look for, if you can, a lot of stores have this now on some of their products, is this little sticker called saying glyphosate residue free. It's a little round green sticker here. I have a picture it's over there. Right there. Generally speaking, if you're getting products made with oats, wheat, soy, and corn, I would look for organic products. And even beer and wine, because those start out as grains that are then harvested and fermented. So get organic for anything on that list. And especially if you can find it, look for the glyphosate residue-free label. So other than food, the other main source is your environment. Herbicides naturally are sprayed on lawns, parks. Unfortunately, golf courses, because I love golf, that just makes me sad. But that's why golf courses look so pretty. They have no weeds because they're sprayed with weed killer, for the most part. So if you're in these environments, wear pants, or if you're wearing shorts, wear high socks with closed-toed shoes, and just don't spray Roundup on your lawn. There's other natural options that are quite effective at getting rid of or preventing weeds. I would highly recommend not spraying Roundup. We used to have back in the day a neighbor who would spray his yard with Roundup in flip-flops. And after doing so, his feet would be glistening with Roundup. So he's quite literally spraying a carcinogenic poison on his skin. I would not recommend that to anybody ever. That is not a good idea. Please do not do that. If you can avoid using Roundup at any cost, just don't use it, plain and simple. Next up, number 4 on the contaminant list is gut overgrowth. And this one is a little more nuanced. We're going to break it down into 2 specific types of toxins, yeast and bacterial overgrowth, namely in the GI tract. So you can see the picture here shows a woman holding her stomach in pain. We're going to start with yeast, the most common of which is Candida. So overgrowth of Candida or yeast in the GI tract causes bloating, gas, stomach pain, diarrhea, constipation, and if it's really severe, white growth on the tongue or around your mouth. And that's very noticeable, obviously. Overgrowth of Candida in the GI tract can be caused or influenced by frequent antibiotic use, because antibiotics, especially stronger ones, nuke the entire GI tract of any bacteria, good or bad, which allows room for the yeast to grow. Can be caused by a weakened immune system to begin with. And this is a big one. It can be caused by blood sugar dysregulation. So if you have high glucose, high insulin or insulin resistance, actually, high hemoglobin A1C, diabetes, pre-diabetes, what you eat carbohydrate-wise really matters if you have issues with Candida, issues with bloating, gas, stomach pain, etc. So what can you do about this? Reduce your carbs, especially if you know that you have issues with Candida. Getting 130 grams of carbs per day or less is a really good idea, and that's because carbohydrates quite literally feed the yeast, especially simple carbs like sugar. So we're talking soda, we're also talking juice. Just because juice is made from fruit doesn't make it not sugar. They remove all of the fiber from the fruit, which is how it turns into a liquid. So that means it's readily absorbed into your bloodstream almost immediately, which will cause an insulin spike and feed Candida or yeast in your GI tract if you have that already. If you want some more specific therapies from our office that are generally safe for most people, the Saccharomycin dairy-free probiotic is fantastic for anything related to digestive issues. Having regular bowel movements is really healthy. We've found this one to be really helpful with diarrhea and constipation. For yeast specifically, Biocidin is a product that we carry. It's a natural antifungal, anti-yeast. And this one is a little more directed at removing the yeast specifically. So that one is a little more intense. 1 to 2 capsules of that depending on what your markers will say. And I say that because we can actually measure if you have these issues in your gut with the organic acids test. We have this test at our office. It's done by a morning urine sample, pretty simple. It measures more than 70 markers, including many markers for Candida and the metabolites of Candida. And on that note, that test also measures bacterial markers in your GI tract. And we're going to talk about one bacteria in particular, Clostridia, which can have different strains. Clostridia bacteria increases your risk of infection, can cause GI distress, obviously, if it's in your GI tract, can cause intestinal inflammation, and can even increase mental health concerns. Now, you might be wondering, how does that happen? How does bacteria in my gut affect my brain? Well, the gut-brain axis is something that is really well studied at this point. Many neurotransmitters, the chemicals that affect your mood and your perception of the world, are produced in the gut. So if you have gut dysbiosis, if you have intestinal inflammation, those neurotransmitters, that production is affected as well. For example, HPA is a metabolite of Clostridia that is measured on the oat test. Research has found that higher levels of this metabolite increases psychiatric symptoms like schizophrenia, autism, seizures, tics, depression, fatigue, ADHD, and more. So it influences quite a bit, actually. So what can you do if you have overgrowth of bacteria in your gut? Number one, reduce your carbs 130 grams per day or less, especially the simple carbs like sugar. Avoid those, generally speaking, anyways, but especially if you're having GI distress. From our office, burbamycin is a natural antibacterial that we use, especially if we know that, like if we've done testing to find bacteria in your GI tract. Burbamycin, generally safe at a lower dose. We only use the higher doses if we've found it from the organic acids test. So if you want to do the organic acids test and figure out what's really going on in your gut, I think that would be a good idea, generally speaking. Moving on to the fifth and final chemical of the day, we're going to be talking about hormone disruptors. So I've boiled this down to three of the biggest ones. There's, of course, more, but we're going to talk about phthalates, bisphenols, and parabens. Phthalates and bisphenols I've put together because they are chemicals used to make plastic. So if we're thinking about phthalates, they're found in cosmetics, which you might not actually see because the pieces are so small. Perfumes and scented items are a huge culprit of this, especially scented candles. For all you candle lovers out there, I'm sorry. Depending on what is used to make the scent, maybe not a good idea. Plastic bottles, plastic wraps, cheap shower curtains, single-use gloves, those are more obvious because they're made of plastic. Cosmetics is the one that's a little more challenging because you can't actually see the microscopic plastic in it. Bisphenols can be found in plastic food and beverage containers, especially those that have a number 7 recycling code at the bottom, those made from recycled plastics. Canned foods and beverages. This is something a lot of people don't know. The inside of a lot of cans, like soda cans, are lined with plastic. So that's another source. You actually can, at some grocery stores now, find cans where on the box for the cans, it'll say BPA free. So that's a better option than the alternative, which is just a standard can. Receipts is a huge one these days. They're printed on the spot. They're hot when they're printed, and then they cool very quickly. So you might notice that they're a little warm when you take them. But receipts are printed with bisphenols in them to do some of what you actually read on the receipt and the paper. And because it's hot, the longer you hold it in your hand right after it's printed, that is absorbed directly into the skin. So receipts can cause hormone disruption. That's something that's being studied more and more, but it's because of these chemicals in the receipts. So if you can, I would avoid getting a receipt entirely, get it by email. Or if you really have to hold a receipt, sometimes you can't avoid it. Just try to toss it in the bag as quick as you can, throw it out as quick as you can, use your shirt, whatever you got to do. Other than that, dental sealants, that's a little more specific. You would know because you would have to go to a dental professional for that. But that's just good to know anyways. The third hormone disruptor that we'll talk about are parabens. So these are preservatives used to reduce mold and bacteria in cosmetics, food, and medications. which sounds great because we don't want mold and bacteria in these products. However, parabens are a known hormone disruptor, which is the bad part of that. So they're typically found in makeup, lotions, soaps, over-the-counter and prescription medications, and some food items depending on which food it is. And I want to take a second to make a note on nail products. So generic nail polish and glues are associated with hormone disruption, developmental issues, breast cancer. There's actually some research that populations of people who work in nail salons have higher rates of breast cancer than other women do, and nervous system disruption. And this is specifically because of the chemicals HEMA and DPP. You can look those up. Those are particular types of parabens that have been studied. So what can you do to reduce your risk, especially if you're thinking, well, I use lotion, I use cosmetics. How do I even know if it's in there? How do I know if it's a good product? And the price doesn't necessarily determine the quality of the product. That is where something like the Yuka app is really useful. Again, we have no affiliation with the Yuka app, but they've made it very simple. You can scan your cosmetics and your personal care products like soaps, lotions, cosmetics, whatever, and it will give you a score based on the ingredients listed out of 100. And generally, I think it's color-coded now. Don't quote me on that. But the closer you are to 100, the closer you are to a perfect score, the higher quality the product is as far as ingredients goes. And this other picture on the screen is an example of the Tox Detect test that we have at our office, done by urine sample. It measures 26 environmental chemicals, including all of the hormone disruptors I listed, as well as other chemicals. So as you can see on this picture, this person has 2 parabens that are in the red zone, which means they definitely are exposed on a regular basis. They have a variety of other chemicals, including bisphenol S, in the moderate yellow zone, which is also not good. So doing a test like this from our office can help us give you a custom detox protocol depending on what chemical is present. And it can also help you identify, here's the chemical that I'm exposed to. Let me do a little bit of investigating and figure out how I can reduce my exposure. So there is no downside to doing the test whatsoever. So that is it as far as specific toxins goes. And we're going to finish up with some general guidelines to reduce your toxin exposure. And there's going to be a lot on this slide. The number one thing that anybody could do ever is filter their drinking water, period. If you're not already doing so, get on it. Drinking water, as you heard in the heavy metal section alone, is one of the most contaminated sources if it's not filtered or if it's of poor quality. So definitely filter your drinking water. Number 2, make sure if you're buying produce on the Dirty Dozen list that you're buying organic or that you're choosing other products entirely. And this includes buying organic grain products like oat, soy, wheat, and corn products. Number 3, make sure you get enough fiber. Fiber, 25 to 35 grams per day, helps ensure regular, healthy bowel movements, which is one of the ways that we excrete toxins. Number 4 is, of course, easier said than done. Toxins are stored in fat tissue. So the more you move, the more you sweat, the healthier you eat, the better your body composition is, the easier you can get rid of these toxins by reducing your fat tissue amount, by reducing your body fat. Number 4, choose gentle, natural household cleaners. There's plenty of products out there that are natural household cleaners that aren't just bleach or like heavy chemical wipes, for example. There's a lot of options that should be pretty self-explanatory. This next one is in the kitchen. Use stainless steel cookware or use cookware that has a healthier non-stick coating. So for example, I use a stainless steel pot for boiling. I've tried a stainless steel pan. If you can get it to work with extra virgin olive oil, sometimes the risk of sticking is higher with stainless steel. That's just the way it is. I prefer a healthier nonstick coating pan. Green pan specifically is the one that I use. The traditional nonstick, they work really well at making things not stick, but that's because they have PFAs and other chemicals in them that have nonstick properties. So if you're going to use, number one, make sure that your cookware isn't scratched, and then go for stainless steel or a healthy nonstick coating. As far as foods go, avoid or reduce your consumption of processed foods with numbers in the ingredients. This includes dyes, colors, etc. If you see a color like yellow, whatever, that's a red flag. Number two, refined foods, high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils. Hydrogenated oils are trans fats intended at making the product have a longer shelf life. So I would avoid these at all costs. Nitrates, there's been tons of research on nitrates linking them to diseases like Alzheimer's, cancer, and diabetes. And these are found a lot of times in cured meats. So these days you can find really easily in the grocery store cured or dried meat products that say nitrate free or no nitrates. Just look for that on the label if that's your thing. Products with fragrances. This one is super easy and super simple. Soaps, lotions, etc. Look for ones without a fragrance because fragrances contain known hormone disruptors for the most part. And then this last one is the most obvious. Alcohol and smoking are both poison, quite literally. They're toxic. Everybody knows this. Avoid or reduce these at all costs. And then this one might surprise you. Supplements are one of the most contaminated products on the planet. And when I say that, it's not to scare you, but it is on us to make sure we're choosing the right supplements and the highest quality ones. So third-party tested supplements, like this logo right here, the NSF standard, that is the gold standard of third-party testing. There are other brands or other companies, rather, that do third-party testing of supplements, but NSF is the gold standard for athletes, so why not have it be the gold standard for us too? Because our health is important as well. So if you take supplements, third-party tested only, please, and I will have more on that on the next slide. And then generally speaking, for anybody, take the Juice Plus capsules or the superfoods powder, plain and simple. No other superfoods or greens powder comes close in terms of research, in terms of quality, and in terms of effectiveness. That's just not up for debate. It's NSF certified for contaminants multiple times. It is the most researched nutritional product on the planet. It gives you the antioxidants from 30 different fruits and vegetables every day to reduce the damage of toxin exposure. And then I have the link here if you want to learn more about that. So, more about supplements, because this is something that we work a lot with. We work with supplements, we work with supplement protocols, we work with detox protocols. Third-party tested supplements only, like the NSF standard, or all of the products that we carry are third-party tested or from a third-party tested facility. And why is that? Why is that so important? That is because the FDA does not evaluate supplements before they're put on the shelf. So contamination and unverified ingredients are way more common than you think. Companies can sell products without proving their ingredients, without proving their effectiveness, and without proving their safety. So it's on us to be making smart decisions here. And a good example of this is, and this is a buzzword, protein powder. Protein is super important, don't get me wrong. but you got to make sure that you're getting clean protein. And when I say that, I'm going to reference Clean Label Project's protein study. This is the second version of it. What they found from testing 180 of the most common products in the US was that 47% of them were contaminated with heavy metals, mostly lead, and some of them contaminated with bisphenols. So protein powder is one of the most contaminated supplements. Please make sure that you're getting a high quality one that has a third-party testing like NSF stamp on the label, or if you know it's from a third-party tested facility. If you're at all in doubt, all of the protein that we carry, both plant-based and whey-based options, we have at our office as well. So that is it as far as all of the information goes. If you want more detail on any of the testing that I mentioned, any supplements that I mentioned, or if you just want to know what to start with, depending on your symptoms and your goals, you can book a free 15-minute phone call with me. You can do all of that by going to our website, nutritionconnectionbalance.com. Along the top there's a What We Treat tab that you can click on to get a list of all the testing. You can view all our supplements, and you can also book a free consultation along the top there. You can also give our office a call. That's our phone number. And remember, we help people across the country. So you don't have to do any of this in person at our office. All of our testing is done in your home, meaning we send the test kit to your house. You collect the sample yourself, following the instructions that we provide, and then ship it off to the lab with the sticker that we provide. And then the lab will give us the results to evaluate, and we'll make a professional evaluation and give you actionable steps, whether that's supplements, lifestyle, or both, to improve your health and your markers. So, briefly here at the end, I want to mention our next upcoming webinar on Tuesday, July 21st. This one is going to be about brain chemistry, the brain chemistry behind your moods, why you might feel anxious, unmotivated, or overwhelmed, even when everything seems fine. The biochemical side of things is something that is often overlooked. Anxiety, depression, burnout, sleep issues, feeling of overwhelm are all affected by your brain chemistry and by your gut chemistry, like I mentioned back on the slides with yeast and bacteria. So how your brain chemistry affects your moods and your energy, the hidden drivers of anxiety, low motivation, emotional ups and downs, and how to tell if your brain chemistry is out of balance. So this is another free webinar that we're having in July. I've got the QR code on the screen right there in the middle. You can scan that with your phone. You can also click the link. I'll have the link posted on social media here soon in our bio for our Instagram as well as Facebook. And you can register there. Registering and joining is free, just like with this webinar. Thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate your time. And feel free to share this with anybody that you think might find it useful. Hope you have a good one.